Hello and welcome to my next tutorial on Premiere Pro. So in this tutorial we're going to do a bit of color. So specifically when we're doing video work, we do color correction and color grading. They're two different things. Color correction is basically just fixing the color. So anything that is overexposed, trying to fix that, or underexposed, and white balance. Those are the two main things. Color grading is more of a cinematic thing for film. It's all about changing the look of the film or the coloring so that it can evoke specific emotions in that audience. So like think about if you know anything about color theory, like making it making the look of the film maybe more green to make it look more evil, or blue to look more dark and scary. So yeah, that's color grading, and that's and color correction is a different thing. So they're two parts of the same thing but different. So in terms of doing color in after what's it called, Premiere Pro, we use the color tab. So there's, like I said earlier in one of my tutorials, I'm using an older version of Premiere Pro. So in this version, the color windows, we can change to different windows setups in Premiere Pro, and the buttons for those are up here. In the latest version of Premiere Pro, I think they got rid of those buttons. I don't know why they do that, but anyway. There's a little button over here somewhere that you can push and it brings up these options for changing the Windows layout. But you can always go to Window over here. And this has never changed for the last 10 years, so yay. So you can always go to Window, Workspaces, and you can go to Color. So there's three ways to change to the different layout. So you can click on in this version, I can go Color, and it will change to the color window. So Window, or you can go to Windows, Color. There's a bunch of different Windows layouts, so we've got the one that we're working in for editing, and you want to use the one that is specific to the task that you're doing. So if you're doing editing, stick to the editing one. If you're doing color, then go to color. If you want to do some effects, you can use the effects one. Though I usually use the effects down here. There's also a graphics one and sound or audio. So yeah, we'll just use the color for now. So when we click on the color window button, it will bring up our color controls over here. So what we're doing is just looking at our shots and doing some basic color correction. So we've got a bunch of different options here for what we can do, and I'm going to click on basic correction. And so I'm going to keep this tutorial fairly simple. So we can look at our shot first of all, and we can see that it's looking pretty good actually. It's not too bad at all. But we can change things like the exposure. We can adjust the exposure. So if we want it to look a little bit more lighter, that will adjust the overall exposure. So I'm going to bring up this control here, or window here, sorry, the Lumetri scopes. And that brings up this scope here, which shows the color, it's like a color chart, I guess, or I don't know, a color graph is probably a better word, and it shows the color in the shot at that time. So if you push play, and you can see that, and just look at it, it's showing the different colors across the spectrum in each shot. So you can see what's happening there, sort of, right? So it's got all the colours in the spectrum there. You've got your reds, blues, greens, yellows, and it's on the graph there. So going back to our controls, we've got our temperature. We can change the colour temperature of the colour. So we can make it bluer. That's a pretty extreme example if you want it to be blue, or orange. And you can change the tint as well to green or purple. Now, generally for the stuff that we're doing, which is like shot type videos and some cityscape videos, this type of stuff, we don't want to mess too much with the original colour, okay? We're not trying to make people feel happy or sadder watching our film. But if we wanted people to feel sad watching this, then we might make it look all blue. But we're not. We're just showing this is what it looks like. So I'm just going to put that back to 0. So don't mess around with the temperature too much until you get to the more filmy type stuff, the storytelling type stuff. That's where you really want to start messing around with the colour. But anyway, so for this type of stuff, we might want to fix the exposure. So if we're looking at our graph here, we want the exposure to be fairly even. So we want to get a fairly even sort of spread on the scope there. So that's looking pretty good. We can change things like the highlights, which are this control here. So the highlights are basically the lighter parts of the shot, and then we've got the shadows, which are the darker parts of the shot. So we can have more shadows, make it more darker, or less shadows to give it less contrast. So more shadows will give it more contrast, and more highlights or less shadows will give it less contrast, right? And same with the highlights. So less highlights, more contrast. And there's also a contrast control. So if you want to just play around with that and see what it does. And then we've got the whites and the blacks. So the whites are, basically the whites in the image. So if we put that all the way up, it pushes the whites. And you can see on the scope up here that it's pushing the whites. So the top of the scope here is the lighter part of it, the lighter colors, I guess, and the blacks. So the whites, the top, blacks down the bottom. So if we push the whites, it's basically peaking. You can see this line here, so it's pushing them further than they can go. There's no more information in the video file, so it can't do anything to it. We can do more if we push the whites down, and then the same with the blacks. So pushing the blacks all the way down, it sort of pushes it past the amount of information that the video file has, so we can't do that much with it. So it does get quite technical. And then we've got the saturation, which is basically the amount of colour in the actual shot. So more saturated means more colourful, and if we want go less saturated, down to 0, that means no colour. So saturation is the amount of colour in the shot. Cool. So as we're going through, we colour correct our shots. Right, so we fix the exposure in our shots. Now, colour correcting is done in colour grading. Colour correcting and colour grading are done last. Okay, so they're the very last step in our post-production process. So we do our editing first, and we get a rough cut. Then we do the sound, if there's any sound. But for this type of project, you don't have to do much with the sound, so just put the music in. And then we do the colour and the colour correction and colour grading last. Okay, they're always last. And then the titles and credits. So, so there we go. That's a little bit of colour correction. Now, with the colour correction, you can just push the auto button if you want. And the computer will try to colour correct it the best that it can. And you can see what it does. It sort of pushes the blacks down and the shadows down and pushes the exposure down a little bit. Now, if you're in a real hurry, you can just do auto for everything and see what happens. But sometimes you get some mixed results, and it might not look the way you want it to look, or it might overdo things like, oh, the exposure doesn't look quite right. So you may want to play around with that and tweak it. And the other thing to keep in mind is that on different screens and different monitors, the colour grading or colour correction and colour grading is going to look different. So if you drag this, if you've got two monitors, if you have this on one monitor and then you drag it onto another monitor, it will look different on each monitor. So That's why when they talk about professional color gradists, or, for films and TV, they work in a dark room with properly calibrated monitors that they can see the proper color on. But anyway, just for what you guys are doing, yeah, like I said, you can push the auto button and you can just see what happens, and if you don't like it, you can change it a little bit. So one problem that you may run into in when you're doing your color correction is the white balance. So we've fixed the exposure on our shots, and they're looking pretty good. Not too dark, not too light, not too overexposed. But another problem is that we'll often have accidentally shot in the wrong white balance, or we didn't white balance our cameras before we started filming, or we set them to auto white balance, and so what happens is we get shots which look like this, which is basically a color cast. So if you shoot in the wrong color temperature on your camera, you'll get this color cast, which doesn't look good, right? Because it should look natural, and people don't look purple like that. So this is where we can fix it, and we've got a couple of shots here, and I'm going to have a go at fixing them. So first of all, let's have a go at fixing this one. So in the color, and we're going to go to our basic correction. And it's a pretty simple fix, but it can be difficult as well. So first of all, we can use our color temperature sliders to try and fix the color temperature. So this one there's quite a bit of purple, so we want to try and dial down the purple a little bit until it looks a little bit more sort of natural, right? So that was what it was before. It was a bit purple. So we're trying to bring the purple down a bit. Now if we bring it all the way down, it's going to go green. So that's not what we want. We just want to adjust the purple there and try and sort of bring the purple down a bit. Maybe want to bring up the temperature a little bit to make it look a little bit warmer. And then go auto. It's looking a little bit better. Maybe I'd probably push the exposure down just a little bit. Cool. And we've also got this, so if I reset the whole thing, zero. We've also got this white balance eyedropper that we can click on a part of the shot that is white, and we can see if it will adjust it. So it's basically telling it that this part of the image is white, so we'll adjust the rest of the colour based on that, which sort of seems to have worked. And then if we go auto, it's looking a little bit better. So it'll push the purples down, and then it will bring up the warmth a little bit in it, and that also will bring the skin tone of the person a bit more, make it a little bit more prominent, so so it looks better. So let's have a go at the next one. So this one, same thing. It's looking pretty purple. So I'll try the eyedropper white balance selector. Find a part of the shot that is white. Looks like that ship there, and it will do the same thing. So it'll just push the purples down and then push the orange up on the temperature, and then I'll go auto. It looks alright. I'll probably push the exposure just a little bit more. I mean, this part of the image up here is quite blown out, so there's not really anything you can do about that. And I probably wouldn't have such an extreme amount of orange in there. I'd go for something a little bit more natural. So yeah, there we go. That is fixing the colour. So exposure and white balance, or colour temperature. So that our shots look a little bit more normal and natural. Here we go.